Out these new costs on the elderly. That's the president's plan. Cut waste, control costs, save Medicare, balance the budget. The right choice for our families.
Right now, Fred Meyer is offering an easier way to get a rebate.
What, $3 or $4?
Actually, over $100.
What?
Just pick up a Fred Meyer cashback ad. You'll find 58 items offering rebates.
And then fill out 58 forms, right?
Nope. Just save your receipts, fill out one form, and send it all to one place. You'll get a cashback check good at any Fred Meyer store for cash or merchandise.
Well, why doesn't everyone do rebates like that?
Good question. One-stop rebates with cashback. You'll find it at Fred Meyer.
A duet from Disney's Pocahontas on the next Live.
From NBC News in Washington, this is Meet the Press with Tim Russert.
Welcome again to Meet the Press. Our issues this Sunday morning: the future of Black America. Jobs, poverty, crime, welfare, out-of-wedlock births, the racial divide after the O.J. Simpson verdict, and more. We'll talk with 4 black men from different walks of life. From the civil rights movement and presidential politics, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Perhaps the most famous criminal lawyer in America today, Johnnie Cochran. Former civil rights worker turned conservative writer and activist, Robert Woodson. And the first black Republican elected to the House of Representatives in a half-century, Gary Franks of Connecticut. Jackson, Cochran, Woodson, and Franks, 4 men with very strong views on the future of black men in America. And in our Meet the Press Minute, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. led a march on Washington 32 years ago.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
And he also had some very important thoughts while he appeared on Meet the Press March 28th, 1965. And joining me in the questioning today is Gwen Eiffel of NBC News. We had planned to begin our program this morning with an interview with the organizer of tomorrow's Million Man March, Louis Farrakhan. Despite repeated assurances from his staff and security force, Mr. Farrakhan has decided not to answer our questions. At 1:05 this morning, Leonard Mohammed, his chief of staff, called Meet the Press and said Minister Farrakhan was suffering from exhaustion and was canceling all appearances today. Now we are joined by 4 men with very strong views on the future of black America. Mr. Cochran, let me start with you. Will you be marching tomorrow?
No, I will not be marching. I'll be, because of business commitments, I'll be in New York tomorrow.
Do you support the march?
I support the principle of the march. I mean, there's some things I'm concerned about the march, quite frankly. I think the exclusion of women. I think the sense of the march is positive, but there's some things that do concern me. So I will not be here personally. But I support black men everywhere who stand up. And what I really support, Tim, is the fact that what goes on beyond the march. Quite frankly, we have a problem in the African-American community. And I hope that it's beyond this march, when we go back to our communities, rededicated, recommitted to trying to take control of our destiny, not have it dictated by those outside the community. But we stand up and really try to improve the lot of African Americans, especially the young people.
Reverend Jackson, will you be marching tomorrow?
I'll be marching and speaking tomorrow. The compelling interest, the greater good is the disgraceful condition of the black community. Dr. King called it 32 years ago the shameful condition of the #1 growth industry in urban America is jails. Half of all public housing built the last 10 years have been jails. Today, 1/3 of every black male aged 20 to 29 is trapped in the jail industrial complex, the cost of $6 billion a year. Because of that state of emergency, I feel that it's important that we have such a march to focus attention on the urban crisis and move from the negative urban policy of chasing welfare mothers, chastising their fathers and locking children up, to some real commitment for reindustrialization of urban America and jobs for parents and education for children. And those issues compel me to march.
Congressman Franks, will you be marching tomorrow?
No, I will not be, Tim. In fact, I do not support the march itself. I think that we have moved beyond that phase in our history, in my opinion. I could not support an initiative led by an individual who would truly espouse hating whites, Jews, and Catholics. Many people who would be members of the Ku Klux Klan would despise blacks, Jews, and Catholics. Plus, as we all know, to a certain degree, he has made some comments that would be also sexist in nature. So I could not support the messenger, or the message is obviously something that we'll be talking about today. But there's no question that anyone following this, this march will be following a person who will be a hate monger, following a person who is trying to say that he's trying to help the race, but all that he's doing is increasing the divide because of his hatred toward others.
Robert Woodson?
I will not be participating in the march, but my 16-year-old son Jamal will be, which I think expresses the kind of dilemma that many families face in this whole issue. The concerns that I have is whether or not the leaders of the march will be able to subordinate their own personal agendas and the agendas of their organizations to the legitimate concerns that these young black men are expressing, coming here seeking atonement and self-fulfillment. I'm also concerned that some of the leaders themselves need atonement and have in the past have established poor records of, on the issues of character and integrity. And I'm just concerned about how they will be able to lead our young people. Young people listen to little of what we say and most of what we do. And so I think that there are issues of, among the leadership of this country that we need to address.
Russ, may I say this, and complimenting what you said, is that my sense is that what the story that's missed is that the Supreme Court and its challenge on districting and Gingrich and those forces now denying life options for many black and urban people really are the lead organizers in this march. The climate has been set. I see 83-year-old people coming from around the country to march, saying just before they die, they want to stand up. There's a sense in which the march is, the sense of urgency is driven by pain, not driven by one personality.
But the problem is, as we all know, to many black Americans and white Americans, that Minister Louis Farrakhan has emerged as the principal organizer. I'd like to roll a tape of, we had prepared to show this to Minister Farrakhan. I'd like to show it to this table and get your reaction to some of his comments.
Many of the Jews who owned the homes, the apartments in the black community, the stores in the black community, we considered them bloodsuckers because they took from our community.
I also went back and read Minister Farrakhan's newspapers, The Final Call, and purchased his tape, his Savior speech, which he gave in March, and I'd like to roll a bite from that right now. This is his own tape.
German Jews finance Hitler. Right here in America, Loeb and Kuhn and Jacob Schiff, international bankers, finance Hitler, and poor Jews died while big Jews were at the root of what you call the Holocaust. Why don't you tell that? Little Jews dying while big Jews made money. Little Jews being turned into soap while big Jews wash themselves with it. Jews playing violin. Jews playing music while other Jews marching into the gas chambers.
Mr. Cochran, you're known for your use of the English language. Are those anti-Semitic words?
I think they are. I mean, I think that they are. There's no two ways about it. I think it's unfortunate language. I think that it detracts from what is a legitimate cause. And I think that's the problem about the march. I think that most of the people who are coming to this march want to seriously point out problems in black America. There's no question about it. This is not about one person. It's not about the minister or his views. I mean, I think the majority of African Americans are totally in support of Israel and support of Jewish people. We want to get along, and I think that should be very, very clear. This detracts from this. This is not about one person's personality, and it's unfortunate language, clearly. I cannot subscribe to that. I don't endorse that. It's inimical to everything that I believe, and I think most of us, all of us feel this way, I'm sure, on this panel, and it's unfortunate.
Reverend Jackson, are those words anti-Semitic?
You know, I find that public discourse very painful. What I want to do, rather than just react to it and go to another Farrakhan panel, I'll talk with some...
This is not going to be a Farrakhan panel. We have a lot to discuss about. But he is a principal organizer.
Well, he's lead organizer, but there are other organizers. I do want to say
But those words are very blunt and candid.
And they're blunt, and they're candid, and they're painful, but I want to go a step beyond...
Are they anti-Semitic?
Obviously they are, but I want to go a step beyond that. I want to reach out to the leaders of the Conference of Presidents of Jews and try to facilitate some dialogue between Minister Farrakhan and other ministers to try to resolve the problem, not just wallow in it. I went through the same painful process when it was said that Arafat's obsession was to drive Jews into the sea. I said, let's talk about it, not just keep killing about it. And in my own time, I've seen the hatred, the fight between Arafat, Rabin, and Peres turn into something good. Mandela and de Klerk, I've seen it turn into something good. And if I didn't give up on that dialogue process in South Africa when the ANC was being called terrorists, or in the Middle East when PLO was being called terrorists, I'm not going to give up on dialogue here. And just to continue to rehearse and recycle this pain, it seems to me, ultimately goes nowhere.
It is far beyond simply Jews, however. The Final Call, which is Mr. Farrakhan's newspaper, ends with the Muslim program on every page. And I'd like to take a look at this and talk about where we go as a country, whether or not we wanted a society that's integrated or separate. Let's look at this, the Muslim program. We have graphics. We want our people in America to be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of their own. The second, we want freedom for all believers of Islam now held in federal prisons. Next, we want the government of the United States to exempt all our people from all taxation. And third, we believe that intermarriage or race mixing should be prohibited. Now, those are the views, the programs expressed in Final Call. Congressman Franks?
They even surprise me. They go, they're so bad. Once again, I'm not surprised that other organizations such as the Urban League, such as the NAACP, such as the Black Ministers, their convention, the National Black Ministers, have all spoken out against this march and also against Mr. Farrakhan. Fellow Congressman John Lewis has done the same. Angela Davis, not known as being a conservative or a liberal, has also done the same. So there's broad-based outrage toward the feelings of the Nation of Islam. It should also be remembered that back during the 60s, African Americans said no to the Nation of Islam then. They said no to the separatist ways of the Nation of Islam. They said no to the hate-mongering ways of the Nation of Islam. Now it's being dressed up in a different manner. And unfortunately, to my displeasure, it has attracted a person like Reverend Jesse Jackson to attend a function of this nature.
If you can go to a Republican convention with Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond and determine you can find some greater good, then I will stand with anybody whose agenda on that occasion makes sense to me. If Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond and Franks and Carol Mose DeBron said we want to have a march to atone for sins of racism. We want to have a march to wipe out malnutrition. We want to have a march for urban policy. I would be on that stage with them because I am willing to go wherever people are, and my agenda will address the values I believe in, or try to appeal to the better angels in people.
But going to where the people are is not where Farrakhan is.
That's right.
And I think what he said is vile, and I think it's reprehensible, and it should be rejected. But also, I don't think the fate of our young people who are marching should be determined by whether or not you can reconcile differences between Farrakhan and Jewish people or anyone else. I just think the fate of our young people is much more important than Farrakhan in that discussion. But I do think it speaks to a kind of moral dilemma that we don't want to talk about either, and that is Rosa Parks was important as a figure not just because of what she did by sitting down on the bus, but by who she was. Because earlier, there was another woman who sat down on the bus, but she was pregnant out of wedlock. She was abusive to the bus driver, and we said, this is not the kind of symbol around which Black America should coalesce, because character and morality were important to us then. But since Rosa Parks, we seem to have abandoned character as a qualification for leadership.
Character is a qualification. I remember in 1963, the attempt was to make the case that the march might get violent. Could Martin Luther King Jr. keep his forces nonviolent? And with Bayard Rustin as the leader organizer, as a homosexual, what about the morality of that? But the issue of public accommodations and jobs and justice and freedom became the greater good. And that's just, it is a dilemma, but every day you walk in that Congress, when Gingrich walked in there the day after he had said that there could not be a genetic-based solution to affirmative action, and when your freshman class Republicans had Maury lecturing to you guys about how to behave, you didn't walk out because it was painful, I suppose, but it was a greater good issue.
But some of us did walk out. Let me say something.
If I can respond to that, I must have missed that meeting. However,
Maury, the race theorist, lectured to
me-
this class of Republican freshmen.
I was not there. This is my
But you know what happened?
No, you informed me of it, and now I'm going to take what you say as being accurate.
It's true.
What should be noted is that during the 1963 march, it was an inclusive march. It was not an exclusive march. It didn't say to people, you can't come, we don't want you, we don't want you, we don't want you. It was a very inclusive.
I was there.
I realize that. I'm just saying it was an inclusive march. This is not. This march is saying to all the women, saying to my wife, saying to my mother, and everyone else who may be a female,
But Dr.
don't
King,
come.
But Dr. King also was a man who practiced moral consistency on social issues. He condemned the violence of the Ku Klux Klan, but he spoke out with equal vigor on the retaliatory violence of the Black Panther Party. And I'm saying that a lot of the leadership today are unwilling to be morally consistent and call to task those black officials who commit personal indiscretions and illegal actions and then pull out the civil rights credit card to protect themselves.
But I must say that it is a dilemma, but it is, and we live in these dilemmas. We don't have the option, it seems sometimes. The same people who are calling for prayer in school, who are calling for end domestic violence, are now voting to end legal assistance for women who are trapped with domestic violence. And so we have to struggle through these dilemmas. It is simply that.
Tim and Gwen, one of the problems we're having, even in this discussion today, is we lose sight of the problem of Black America. Right. And that's what I really want to get back to. And I think that's the real issue here, and it's a real problem. It shouldn't center around one person and that person's views, and that's really the problem when you talk about Dr. King or Minister Farrakhan. The problems of Black America are there. The problems of us not talking to each other as a people in this country are there. Those are the things we need to talk about. We need to talk about how we're going to make things better as we enter into the 21st century. And I'm concerned about that.
Let's talk about it for a second. We talk, the 95 or say 75% of what the Nation of Islam promotes and talks about is self-reliance, community responsibility, personal responsibility, very conservative tenets, which I assume you, Congressman Franks, would support. Why do we never hear you supporting what the Nation of Islam supports in the
They also support reparation. That doesn't sound like personal responsibility. It says that someone is being blamed for something and someone else should be paid for it.
But is there not a message overall in this march for people who are marching that is a positive one that black men can take, or white men or black women can take from it?
Well, the mere fact that apparently a number of people will be coming to this march, the mere fact that that has been drawn together is something to note. There's no question about that.
Every man on the street interview indicates people are coming driven by pain and predicament. They're coming because the two newest buildings in every major city is a new ballpark and a new jail. And between those two mountains, industry has left. And so, my sense is, as jobs go out, and tax base go down, and schools become second class, and jails become the #1 industry, people are driven by that pain.
The dilemma I hear from black men I respect, including my own pastor, is that you cannot separate that message from the message. He's going to march, but he's concerned about separating the message from the messenger. Is that possible?
It's difficult, but I think that a lot of people have made that choice. I mean, you had a choice of staying home. I mean, I think, as I said, the great majority of the people who are coming tomorrow, I mean, most of them certainly aren't anti-Semitic. They aren't anti-women. They aren't any of those things. But they're in pain in their communities. They're frustrated about the governmental policies. They see the rollbacks. They see the things that are happening in their communities. They want to do something about it. This is their way to step up. So there is a dilemma, but I think we have to talk about the positive aspects. And I think for those who say that people who are coming tomorrow is a ringing endorsement of any one person, Minister Farrakhan, anybody else, I think that's quite wrong.
But there's a subtle message in even what Mr. Cochran said, and Jesse Jackson has also, about their coming to protest. I personally don't think you can mix salvation and protest.
Why not?
Because I think if you're seeking to reclaim yourself and your community, that requires changing your heart. It is our black men who are killing 10,000 of one another a year. 10,000 black men are killed. Those are moral decisions that they are making. You cannot say to them that you have to change your heart and go back and reclaim yourself and your family, and then at the same time say, however, there are reasons why you're doing this, because if you ever, the oil of blame with the water of responsibility don't mix. even though one can rightfully say that there are external causes that must be addressed, but they must be separate from matters of atonement.
Bob, you have to start somewhere, Bob. You have to start somewhere, though, Bob.
that Nehemiah took. When Nehemiah looked and saw that the walls were down, his people trapped in disgrace, he inquired, prayed, fasted. He atoned. He said, God, I may have done something less than my best, and that's why the walls are down. He assumed responsibility. He now said, however, we must now rebuild the wall. So there's a direct connection between atonement on the one hand and the will to rebuild the wall.
Reverend Jackson, should women stay home tomorrow?
Well, men and women are coming. And I think the purpose...
Should women stay home and take care of the children, as Minister Farrakhan has
Well, I do not identify with that. After all, 51% of all black households are headed by women. I think the point there is, the attempt to split this apple is this, is that many black men have laid back. They've made babies and not raised them. They've been trapped in these violent syndromes. The idea is for men to march, not to subjugate women, not to be against ERA, but to march to become better partners and better companions for women. And that attitude is of such until many black women support the march on that basis. This is not an anti-ERA or a pro-domestic violence rally. That is not true.
But Nehemiah, he mentions Nehemiah. It's interesting because Nehemiah also counseled against the wealthy among their own people subjugating the poor. He talked about the class struggle even within their own group. They were taxing one another, the poor. They were people having to sell their daughters into slavery to pay back these taxes. So he talked about the internal problems. Black America, we have got to talk about the internal challenges, whether or not white people change, whether or not the Congress changes. There are certain problems that we must address, and they must be separate from
protests. And it sounds like what this march is about.
Yes, and I would agree. If the march focuses on that, we will have accomplished it.
If I can address your question directly. You cannot separate the message from the messenger. Dr. Chavez has said that you should not. He's one of the co-organizers of this event. The chief of staff of Louis Farrakhan said you cannot. So they are saying, whether Reverend Jackson or anyone else would like to hear this, that the message and the messenger would go together.
Let me get the views of everyone at the table then. White America is also watching this march. And do you believe the people who are going to march tomorrow, whether they're several hundred thousand or a million, are closer to or subscribe to the Muslim program as put out by Reverend Farrakhan? Or are they closer to Martin Luther King, who said, I dream when little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls and walk together as brothers and sisters. Is this a march about integration or separatism? Mr. Cochran?
I think it's more of a march about integration. I think the people who are coming here are in pain. I think people who they see in America, I think they see a vision of America that's not barbed wire from sea to shining
It's a march about survival. You understand that
but is it integration or separatism?
It is not. That's a false dichotomy.
It's a false dichotomy. I mean, the reality is we affirm public accommodations. We affirm the right to vote. Having said that, last year in San Diego, 30,000 mortgage loans on the 29 went to blacks. That's real segregated capital by those who got the capital. I mean, right now, the primary investors in the new jail prison complex are American Express, GE, Goldman Sachs, Smith Barney. I mean, the pain coming at us is far different than that fig leaf dialectic, it seems to me.
But Reverend Jackson, are you closer to the views of Martin Luther King Jr. or Louis Farrakhan?
Of course I'm close to those views. I marched in '63, I marched in '95, and I'm going to keep on marching. I'm going to keep on making the case for jobs and justice and an even playing field for all of the American people. I'm going to keep on making that case.
But King, not Farrakhan.
Well, I don't think we need to get into that. I don't think that is the issue here. Because the march...
Well, it's integration versus separatism.
It is not that. Because that Farrakhan's the lead organizer in this, but Reverend Joseph Lowry, Reverend Sharpton, Bisha Hicks, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, the Congressional Black Caucus, there's a broad body of interest here driven by pain and predicament, seeking some solutions for very real problems.
I believe some people have been hoodwinked in just showing up for this event. They were told that this is an event in which let's bring together all black men to talk about personal responsibility. In reality, this is an event about promoting Louis Farrakhan.
Let me
this
just
is
say
an
to
event
you,
about promoting the views of Louis Farrakhan.
I have to
and now it's
disagree
becoming
with you.
clearer and clearer to a number of people that this is a Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam type of movement.
Mr. Whitson,
I have to disagree. I don't think that those thousands of people are hoodwinked. I think our people are brighter than that. That they can distinguish between the views of so-called leaders and their own hunger for restoration. And I think that's what, my son is not coming because of Louis Farrakhan. He's coming because he wants to join in solidarity with young men who are less fortunate than he is.
I agree with that.
But on every
So that he can share. So
Yeah,
I think it's a real put down of our people to assume that they are being hoodwinked.
Now, if you would go out and see all the T-shirts, you're going to see Louis Farrakhan all over them. Now, once again, organizations like the NAACP, when they were talked to, the Urban League, Angela Davis, the Black Ministers, Congressman John Lewis, and the list goes on and on. They said no.
But my concern about the march...
If these men go back home, the renewed commitment to direct action and voter registration, we put on 3 or 4 million more voters next year and focus on some economic development in our own communities and political alliances, it will change the course of our country.
See, that's the problem I have, whether Louis Farrakhan was the president or not.
Let us take a quick break for a commercial. We'll be right back with Mr. Cochran, Congressman Franks, Mr. Woodson, and Reverend Jackson right after this message.
Meet the Press is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world.
Every second of every day, there are 3 new mouths in this world to feed. Hundreds of millions more by the year 2000. And the majority of them will be born in countries where malnutrition is already reaching alarming proportions. Right now, the world has the food and the resources to conquer hunger. But it won't happen as long as we continue to look the other way. ADM, supermarket to the world.
Its roomy interior can accommodate 3,000 comfortably. It boasts advanced safety features, ergonomically designed control panels, and a superior ventilation system for cleaner air. Announcing Ford Motor Company's state-of-the-art assembly plants. All the enhancements we made for the people in here may be appreciated most by the people in here. Ford, quality is job one.
Quite frankly, any car worth its warranty can stand up to this test. But try it with a washing machine, and we suggest using the incredible new GE Profile. With an innovative automatic balance system, it can take on bulky, uneven loads and still run as smooth as a luxury coupe. The revolutionary new GE Profile. Take one out for a spin today.
No one gives you more ways to add the impact of color to black and white documents. Xerox Color, a simpler way to do good work.
Relax, kick back, rest easy. Not the first thoughts that come to mind when investing on your own. Working with a Dean Witter broker, you'll feel differently.
Every client's ambition should be our ambition. Their dreams, our dreams.
Because after all, it's reassuring to know someone is there looking out for your interests. Dean Witter.
We measure success, one investor at a time.
No matter how you try to spoon it out, or squeeze it out, or pour it out, you can never get the fat out of sausage. But now there's breakfast links from Green Giant. They're all vegetable with no cholesterol and 81% less fat than pork sausage. And the taste? They're everything you'd expect from the Giant. Breakfast links and breakfast patties from Green Giant.
Ho, ho, ho.
When you want the flavor, not all the fat.
We're back with Jackson, Woodson, Franks, and Cochran. Sounds like a hell of a law firm out there.
Except the lead lawyers, Clinton Jeffrey Cochran.
And as a congressman, I have problems with lawyers.
Speaking of law, there is no doubt that the O.J. Simpson verdict magnified the racial divide in the country. Mr. Cochran, I'd like to play something from your closing argument and talk about it as to where we go in this discussion.
Who then polices the police? You police the police. You police them by your verdict. You're the ones who send the message. Nobody else is going to do it in this society. They don't have the courage. Nobody has the courage. You have a bunch of people running around with no courage to do what is right. Except individual citizens. You're the ones in war. You're the ones who are on the front line.
What is the war? What's the front line?
The front line, in that case, we felt there was a cover-up of the evidence that was ongoing. The prosecutors weren't going to stop it. The police weren't going to stop it. That finally these 12 citizens, good and true, would have to reject that part of the evidence. If they didn't, then it seemed it would go on to me. I think that's a very, very valid point. And the point I was making, and this is not about jury nullification, this was about the evidence. And quite frankly, this jury rejected the evidence, and it wasn't about race. I mean, what most Americans have forgotten, of course, is that this was a jury that, although it was predominantly black, had 2 whites and an Hispanic. And it was obviously unanimous at some point. So the point I was saying is that jurors, Tim, are the consciences of this community. They're the citizens who determine right and wrong, and they look at the facts.
When you say you're the ones in war, what's the war? Blacks against the LAPD,
no.
blacks against police?
No, they're the ones, really, what I was trying to say, on the front line. They're the ones who it seems to me, are the ultimate determiners of the truth. And in that regard, I said, this was not for the timid or the faint of heart. Now, they could bury their heads and say that there's no such thing as police perjury. There's no such thing as that sort of thing. But this jury chose not to do that.
When you say you're the ones who send the message.
Yes.
Very reminiscent of George Wallace back in the 60s saying, send the message.
No, this was in the courtroom. This was what I was saying was that their verdict bespoke whether or not there was still, in the views of some, justice in America. In other words, if they'd gone along with the prosecution's so-called mountain of evidence, just buying everything they were told, then, you know, I don't think they would send a message. I think by them standing up and showing some courage and saying, wait a minute, we don't see a mountain. As a juror said, they saw little more than a molehill. They took the high road. They're now taking criticism for them, which I think is very, very unfortunate.
Can I say this? You know, I've wrestled with whites and blacks looking at this so differently. It's like if one person's looking at an apple top down and sees a shiny red apple, another person looking bottom up and sees worm and rot, and looking at the same apple, but their views are determined by the vantage point from which they stand. We would do better, it seems to me, to look at the Kerner Commission report and dust it off and look at why we have these two societies and why we have the structural malfunction. My last point is that there's been almost no discussion of the prosecutors in their closing arguments saying, we know Furman is a racist. Now, we know that, but here's the real deal. Well, if a racist policeman perjured himself, that has to fit in the message. The police should not perjure themselves, and they should not be loosely using race cards.
Go ahead. Congressman Franks, I was going to ask you, the post-O.J. Simpson verdict, the fallout. Frank Rich in the New York Times wrote a column where a friend sent him an email message saying there's going to be a white riot. Whites are going to move to Nevada and to Idaho and the suburbs, and they're also going to be harder and harsher on programs like Medicare and Medicaid and school lunch and others. Your reaction?
No, I would say that that would not be the case. I believe that deep down inside, all Americans would respect the jury system. There's no question that there are innocent men and women today sitting in jail. There's no question that there are guilty men and women walking the streets of America. Sure. But it's not a perfect system. As far as I'm concerned with Mr. Simpson, God and O.J. Simpson. God and O.J. Simpson will reconcile whatever problem there may be. If O.J. Simpson did commit that crime, then I really pity his life on this earth, as well as the hell that he will face upon his death. So I think that Americans can reconcile themselves to the fact that we do not have a perfect system, but we have to respect the system, and that there is a supreme being above the courts, and that is God Almighty.
And Tim, the system has worked well. That's the thing. You don't fix it if it's not broken. The system has worked, and the thing that troubles me is that this case is over. This jury spoke, and we've got to move on. Now we've got to talk about the case did highlight the things that divide us and how we perceive things. But shouldn't we be about talking about how the things that unite us and getting on with that, how we can do better in this country to help it live out the true meaning of its creed?
Next year in California, there will be a referendum on affirmative action, whether to continue it or not. What will the fallout be on that referendum in light of the Simpson verdict and some of the other racial divides we talked about, Mr. Woods?
Well, first of all, I think a comment on, before I move on, that the presence of racist police officers do not mean that black criminals are innocent. I think those are two different. But I think, first of all, any criminals. No, I agree. But I think, first of all, 47% of blacks polled favor changing affirmative action. They are not supporting of it. Also, the Washington Post opinion poll said that 63% of blacks tend to believe that decisions ought to be made on merit. And so I think that there's not a monolithic black and white issue on affirmative action. I think it should be revised to reflect not race or gender, but class. When you look around the table, I was on a talk show and they said, Mr. Woodson, what's the state of black America? I said, those of us sitting around this table, life ain't bad. And we need to stop lying to the American public as if all blacks are aggrieved and all blacks are suffering. Some of us are not. Perhaps we ought to defer support and resources that go to people like us and direct them to people who are deprived economically, black, white, Hispanic, Asian.
The evidence is that women, just because they're women, face glass ceilings. There is sexism. The evidence is that blacks and browns, just because they're blacks, are born in deeper holes and face closed and locked doors. And because of that, the law says that race and sex are supplemental factors among other factors in offsetting negative action with something called affirmative action, a rather conservative solution. I spoke to 15,000 students at Berkeley on this past Thursday, and often people make affirmative action and black synonymous, but the majority of beneficiaries are white women, and then blacks and browns, disabled, and Native Americans. That constitutes the majority, not the minority. And so I'm convinced that people in California might very well vote to sustain a program of inclusion to offset many years of exclusion.
Congress, Reverend Jackson, do you believe that white voters' attitudes, in light of the O.J. Simpson verdict, may harden, and they may use the referendum and vote against affirmative action to send their own message?
Well, some voters may harden, but it'd be difficult for me to imagine white men voting against their wives and daughters, or who now can go beyond being educated domestics. Again, if you make black and affirmative action synonymous, there are those who would say, now that we don't like the O.J. Simpson trial, let's vote against affirmative action. But when they make that move, they're voting against their own household breadwinner and the majority of the American public.
That is true, but I'm reminded, I'm from California, that last year in Prop 187, an issue with regard to immigration, the voters, this is pre-O.J. Simpson, obviously, voters overwhelmingly approved that. I mean, it was very, very divisive. So there may be some fallout, but Reverend Jackson is right. I mean, you're voting against your own interests. The primary beneficiaries of affirmative action in this country have been white women, you know, in large measure. Now, I think that, you know, it's a solution. It may not be a perfect solution, but this is not a society based upon true merit. And that's the way I have the problem. It's not catch-up. And as Bob said, some of us are doing well, but that's not really the test. I mean, I am my brother's keeper. I'm not free until all African Americans are free, and we can't forget that. I mean, most of us are still carry Dr. King within our system.
Let's talk about the plight of African Americans. Alvin Poussant, the psychiatrist from Harvard, said the other day, black men are in terrible shape, lacking spirit and direction and hope and everything else. He talked about 1 in 3 being in jail or probation or parole. 1 in 20 of African American men die of homicide before the age of 30. Congressman Franks, what do you do about that?
Well, I'd like to touch upon affirmative action a little later on, but I will address your question right now. There's no question, Tim, that our welfare system has truly been, I think, public enemy #1 to the African American community and to all those who are poor, quite frankly. We have a system today that says, Tim, if you're 17 or 18 years old, you want to get an apartment, just have a baby and the government will set you up an apartment. If you're a young male and you can't find a job, get a couple of women pregnant and they will be able to supply you with dollars that will allow for you to sustain yourself. We have a system today that would say to that young lady, if the male's present in the home, there's no more benefits. We have a system today that unfortunately will allow for individuals to have 25% of all individuals who are utilizing welfare today are drug abusers. And we have a system today that's helping to fuel our drug industry today. So we have to look at, last point. We have a system today that would not even allow for us to rigorously go after identifying the father. How are you going to correct the problem or hold people accountable if you're not even going to try to find out who the father would be? Our welfare reform bill would ensure that, #1, we would identify the father of the child and start to hold that person.
Put this in your repertoire. 3 years ago in Chicago, they opened up 500 jobs at Sheraton Hotel, and 5,000 people showed up. the evidence is that you fight welfare with jobs, and you fight some of this broken spiritedness among our youth with education. And I'm convinced it's some combination, both of the sense of self-reliance, the sense of revived spirit, and opportunity. It requires both to make progress.
Well, let me just say that you cannot, but more, we do. Someone said no one should or will do more for you than you're willing to do for yourself. We have 150 black organizations that meet every year and spend over $3 billion on goods and services and hotels, and yet we complain that what whites are not spending on our job development. If those organizations were to come together in clusters of 10 and agree to have their conference in 1 year, then they could bank that money and buy their own conference. We need to talk about generating our own resources.
Can I just backpedal just a little bit? Mr. Woodson, you wrote a story in the New Republic magazine in which you talked about the O.J. Simpson trial. And you said that it would be a dangerous embarrassment to the legacy of the civil rights movement to draw any racial imperative from this trial. I'd like to ask Mr. Cochran to respond to Mr. Woodson's statement for you two to have a little exchange.
Well, I think
that's not exactly what I said, but go ahead.
Let me respond. I didn't read the article, but I think that I think it's really important for people to realize that when the jury and when you saw, basically, the parts of the world stood still at 10:07 on October the 3rd, 1994. And I think that when you saw African Americans, in large measure, we're not a monolith, rejoicing, it was because many of them perceived that justice had worked in this instance for this particular man. It transcended just O.J. Simpson. So I think there was a message there for those of us who believe in the system, that here things were stacked pretty much against us. There were preconceived notions. There was all this rhetoric that went on, but yet some people listened to the evidence and they culled through that, and the system did work. I think that's what people were rejoicing about. So I think there's a message there. I think that the other message about O.J. Simpson perhaps might be that competence comes in all colors and is no respecter of age or gender. I think that's the message I get when I go around the country, and I think that's probably a positive message, especially among African Americans.
Well, I had two kind of responses to it, and that is, I think the moment we began to talk about juries sending political messages, that's what totalitarian regimes do. They use the court system to make political statements, and our system,
but I don't think they use juries, but they don't use juries. They might have a judge appointed by the state.
Yeah, they have,
See,
but they also have
juries
juries that do, okay. But the second point, I guess the problem I had is I understand that you had to say what you did as a necessity to get your client off, and for that I applaud you. But I think the moment you come before the Congressional Black Caucus and liken the O.J. Simpson circumstance to Plessy versus Ferguson in the '54 Supreme Court decision, I find that most outrageous, and you do a disservice to the legacy of civil rights by making that necessity into a moral imperative for all black America to compare O.J. Simpson's plight with that of the '54 Supreme Court decision. O.J. may be a great person, but he is not a Rosa Parks.
No, absolutely not. And let me explain that. The reason I talked about watershed events in our history as a people. And I think that for America, we've had 3 wake-up calls recently. I think the Rodney King case was a wake-up call. I think those Furman tapes are a wake-up call for people who didn't believe the police ever did these kind of things. And I think the verdict is still a further wake-up call, because it has pointed out the division and how we see various things. When I talked about the various cases from Plessy versus Ferguson, I talked about the progress of cases in African Americans' lives, since from Plessy versus Ferguson, the separate but equal concept, all the way to Brown versus Board of Education, and where we are today. And then I tried to tie that in to Simpson. What we were talking about, you see, the subject was this: when race doesn't matter. And everybody on that panel came to the conclusion that, unfortunately, in America, race still matters much more than you would otherwise think. And
I actually want to ask you
about this trial.
I actually want to ask you a question about black leadership, which is what's coming out of this march tomorrow. Louis Farrakhan is going to be the leader of the march. He has said that he's going to take up where you leave off. People have also said that maybe this is his way of building himself up for eventual black leadership. There are Chicago activists who said you've faded. What does this mean for black politics? What happens after this march tomorrow?
That means almost nothing, because what my concern is, there's a broad base of leadership, whether they are mayors like Smoke, or whether they're congressional leaders or legislative leaders. They will go back home hoping that there will be a moral tone, go back home hoping that those who are marching for the first time, who didn't believe in voter registration, who saw that only registered voters can serve on juries, if they go back home and register 3 or 4 more voters each, 4 million new voters would change the entire direction of our country in 1996. I hope that kind of positive work ethic comes out of this march.
We have not talked about the most popular black American in the country today, Colin Powell. According to every survey. Reverend Jackson, do you hope Colin Powell runs for president and becomes the first African American to hold that position?
It would be a good thing, but you know what? 1 week is Powell. Next week is OJ. Next week is Farrakhan. These become kind of like fig leaves. We're discussing stuff up here.
This is the presidency. This is not a criminal trial.
Yeah, but it's also media recycling fig leaves. My concern is, what week will we discuss the impact of an ignored Kerner Commission report on the divided America? And when will we discuss the impact of the Sentencing Commission that says not only are 1/3 of the young blacks in jail, but that they're there based upon unfair conditions and traps? And so my struggle with you, quote, and other media is at some point that I am going to discuss the pain of black people, not fig leaves that sell newspapers.
Mr. Woodson, should Colin Powell run for president?
I hope he does, only because I think he represents a figure that seems to be morally consistent. But I have to agree with Reverend Jackson on this, something he said years ago, that the decisions made in our own house are more important than decisions made in the White House. Who is in the White House is irrelevant to those 10,000 kids who are blowing their brains out each year. We've got to get beyond the issue of politics and ideology and get down to discussing internal strategies for our own salvation.
Mr. Frank, should Colin Powell run for president, and should he run as a Republican?
Yes, on both counts. In fact, I said that to the general when I met with them at the Congressional Black Caucus function.
Would you support him?
I am the national co-chairman of Phil Graham's campaign, but I would welcome Colin Powell into the race.
Would you support him?
I would hope that Colin Powell will help us in a lot of race baiting that we have in this country.
Mr. Cochran, do you think Colin Powell should run for president? Would you support him?
Yes, I think that I don't know about supporting him. I don't know where he stands on the issues, but I think he should run. I think he should run. I think we don't know where he stands on the issues, but it's a positive message. And Black America, we need positive role models.
If his running means urban policy and means a renewed focus on something like domestic violence and wife battering, my concern is fig leaves, yes, but let's focus on the substance that we expect of our leaders, whoever they are.
Before we go, we're out of time. Mr. Cochran, I'm not sure you're aware, but O.J. Simpson was going to be interviewed on NBC last Wednesday night.
Yes, well, I found that out after the fact, right?
The interview was canceled.
Yes.
If O.J. Simpson, and this is the question I heard from everybody, if O.J. Simpson is innocent, why won't he sit and answer all questions about his guilt or innocence?
And he will, Tim, he will. He wants to very much. What happened was the lawyers, and we were unanimous in this, said, if there are 3 civil cases pending, it is unwise for you to give a pre-deposition before that time. He'll be making statements under oath at the deposition. And I assure you that O.J. Simpson wants to and will.
But if he has a
speak to the American people.
simple, honest message, the truth, regardless of any civil trial, why not tell it?
I think he'll do it. I think they are, obviously, people are trying to take his property, trying to take his money, and as a lawyer, and this again, as lawyers, we're advising him not to do it yet. He will, in fact, do it. So he wants to do it now. It's just a question of when. It's going to happen.
So Tom and Katie will talk to O.J. Simpson?
Well, somebody's going to talk to him. Somebody's going to talk to him.
That has to be the last word.
Tom and Katie are either both sides of Jesse Jackson.
Right. That's the fig leaf. That's the fig leaf we were talking about. Jesse Jackson, Robert Woodson, Gary Franks, Johnny Cochran. Thank you all. We have to take a break. We'll be right back.
Meet the Press is sponsored by Lexus Luxury Automobiles, the result of a relentless pursuit of perfection.
Life rarely imitates orange cones. Orange cones, however, can be made to imitate life. At Lexus, we've created a suspension system so advanced, it's smooth when you want it to be, and responsive when you need it to be. The 1996 LS400. Impossible, the laws of Lexus state otherwise.
One of the newest developments in nutrition is actually one of the oldest foods known to man, the soybean. For over 4,000 years, the Chinese have used it to make nutritious, protein-rich foods. But in America, the history of the soybean is considerably shorter. In fact, it didn't become a widely used food ingredient here until the 50s. One thing's for sure, though, it's come a long way since then. Over the years, one company has led the way in unlocking the versatility of the soybean. A company that each day continues to develop new ways to use this abundant, functional source of protein. The Archer Daniels Midland Company. That's using the old bean.
AT&T now offers you the only program with savings on all kinds of calls, no matter where you make them or who you make them to. No competitor single plan offers this broader reach. Introducing AT&T True Reach Savings. You'll save on every type of call on your AT&T phone bill to anyone, anywhere in the U.S. Sign up and save 25% every time you spend just $25 a month. True Reach. That's your true choice. AT&T.
This is a document in the digital office where you capture ideas and share them effortlessly. Whether they're on paper or on your screen, this is the space where Xerox works, giving you a simpler way to do good work.
This GE compact fluorescent bulb gives you soft, warm light.
Take the ball, Jamie.
It's an energy-efficient bulb that lasts year after year.
Hit the ball, Jamie.
Up to 9,000 hours longer than an ordinary bulb.
Outside with the ball, Jamie.
So it won't need to be changed for about 7 years.
Hey, Jamie, how many grown-ups does it take to change a light bulb? Change a light bulb? Why would anybody need to change a light bulb?
The revolutionary GE compact fluorescent bulb.
More of Meet the Press after this brief news and weather update.
Good morning. 6 Israeli soldiers were killed and several others wounded in Lebanon when a bomb exploded. Meantime, Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres and PLO Chief Yasser Arafat announced an important date. They agreed that Israeli troops would begin leaving a West Bank town on October 25th. And there's a referendum on the ballot in Iraq today on making Saddam Hussein the nation's president for 7 years. Iraqis arrived early at polling places. The ballot has a simple yes or no question, and most voters openly filled out the form to show support for Saddam. Also, procedures allow authorities to determine who failed to vote. Many Russians say they couldn't believe their eyes as they watched a bus hijacking unfold near Moscow's Red Square. Commandos stormed the bus to end the 10-hour siege this morning. A gunman had been holding 4 South Korean tourists and the driver while demanding $10 million ransom. Earlier, 20 others had been freed. Witnesses say this incident was unthinkable under the communist regime. And a small explosion near New York's LaGuardia Airport is being probed as a possible terrorist attack. A wind shear detector was found vandalized, as many had been before, but this time, a note with a swastika was found. The FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force has joined this investigation. And as you've been hearing, final preparations are underway for tomorrow's Million Man March in Washington. Black men from across America are heading toward the Capitol. The Reverend Louis Farrakhan says he called for the march to bolster a sense of responsibility and self-reliance among black men. But Reverend Farrakhan has been at the center of controversy for his remarks, widely interpreted as anti-Jewish, anti-Arab, and anti-Asian. And Republicans in the House have disclosed their plan to abolish the Commerce Department. It would end about 40 programs, and sponsors claim it would save $8 billion over 7 years. Sponsor of the program is freshman Congressman Dick Chrysler of Michigan. That's the news this Sunday morning. Now back to Tim Russert in Washington.
Our Meet the Press Minute with Martin Luther King Jr. is next.
Monday on Today, is America ready for a black president? Presidential candidate Colin Powell talks about race in America. So join us Monday and see what a difference today makes.
They're young, but what does their future hold? Black men in America. What is the Million Man March about? Watch Giselle Fernandez on the Sunday edition of NBC Nightly News tonight.
Now that your deck planters are going out of bloom, it's a great time to repot them with flowering bulbs for next spring. It's one of the easiest projects to do and a great one for the kids. Now I like to use bulbs in planters because you can arrange them anywhere on your deck, front porch, and they're great for apartment patios too. This year, I'm planting up over a dozen planters, and I find that tulips and lilies put on the best show of color. Now daffodils, hyacinths, and crocus are also good, and make sure you plant a lot of them in each pot. Now for taller planters, start with a deeper layer of bulbs. Add a couple inches of potting soil, then another layer of bulbs over the top. That way you'll have several weeks of continuous blooming. Now you'll need to water, and if we get a week of freezing temperatures, you might want to bring them in the garage for a while. So plant your bulbs now. They need to go through the cold winter in order to bloom in the spring. I'm Mike Brayman. See you next time on the Northwest Gardener.
You ever thought of volunteering at your kid's school? I promise it'll be fun, and you won't even need a hall pass for the bathroom.
News Channel 8 can also be seen on these local translators.
30 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. appeared on this program and talked about the politics of nonviolence.
Dr. King, your movement has been distinguished for its nonviolent approach, but your people are under great pressures in many cases. How deeply do you fear the eruption of Negro violence in pursuit of Negro rights?
I feel that we will continue to have a nonviolent movement, and we will continue to find a vast majority of Negroes committed to nonviolence, at least as the best tactical approach, and from a pragmatic point of view as the best strategy in dealing with the problem of racial injustice. Realism impels me to admit, however, that when there is justice and the pursuit of justice, violence disappears, and where there is injustice and frustration, the potentialities for violence are greater. And I would like to strongly stress the point that the more we can achieve victories through nonviolence, the more it will be possible to keep the nonviolent discipline at the center of the movement. But the more we find individuals facing conditions of frustration, conditions of disappointment and seething despair as a result of the slow pace of things and the failure to change conditions, the more it will be possible for the apostles of violence to interfere.
We face the same issues 30 years later. We'll be right back.
It's been said that everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. For some, that's just their daily commute. The 1995 Lexus Coupe.
Relax, kick back, rest easy. Not the first thoughts that come to mind when investing on your own. Working with a Dean Witter broker, you'll feel differently.
Every client's ambition should be our ambition. Their dreams, our dreams.
Because after all, it's reassuring to know someone is there looking out for your interests. Dean Witter.
We measure success, one investor at a time.
This is the hand that turned on the light, that lit up the desk where the idea was born for a quieter jet engine that flew the technician who works at the power plant, which produces its energy far more efficiently as it lights up the city and powers the hospital with its life-saving images, where Sam was found healthy, in time for the game, held under the lights and broadcast to millions by a communication system designed with precision and shipped by powerful locomotives that passed by a factory that helped build a car with advanced thermoplastics that sits in the drive at the home of Patricia, who went to the fridge and got a drink for her dad, who works in the room where he turns out the light as he puts his young daughter to bed.
Every day, GE technology touches the lives of just about everybody.
Tomorrow and Today, Katie Kirk will talk about race in America with Colin Powell. Tomorrow night, NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, live from Washington, in-depth report on the Nation of Islam. That's all for today. We got to go. It's Meet the Press. We'll be back next week.